Video, I'd like to continue our study of Pliny's Natural History, reading Chapter 4 of Book 2, which is Lesson 3 in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Natural History course. The topic of Chapter 4 is the elements and the planets. The elements and the planets. So let's read together the content of Chapter 4 of Book 2 of Pliny's Natural History. Pliny writes, I do not find that anyone has doubted that there are four elements. I do not find that anyone has doubted that there are four elements, four natural elements out of which the world is built. Okay? The highest of these four elements is supposed to be fire. So the first and highest element is fire. And hence proceed the eyes of so many glittering stars. The first of the elements is fire. The next is that spirit which both the Greeks and ourselves, the Romans, call by the same name, air. So the first element, the highest and first element, is fire. The second of the four elements is air. It is by the force of this vital or living principle, pervading all things and mingling with all things, that the earth, together with the fourth element, water, is balanced in the middle of space. So these are the four classical elements of nature, the four elements. Fire, which is the highest, air, earth, and water. Or we should actually, if we want to put them in the right order from highest to lowest, we would say fire, air, water, earth. Okay? These are the four ancient elements. So what the ancient philosophers taught, based on our own observation, is that there are four basic elements or substances out of which the natural world is made: fire, air, water, and earth. Now, the movement of these things, I'll just comment on this a bit. The movement of these things is related to their nature. And what that means is they were created to be in a certain place or in a certain order. It's natural for fire to be on top, and that's why heat rises. If you light something on fire, the flames shoot upward, because fire seeks to be above air. That's their nature. And all of the elements, the four elements, are always trying, if we move them, if we move the element, if we take a rock from the bottom of the sea and bring it up to the surface and let it go, the rock will seek to return to its natural place. If we take a cup of water and carry it up into the top of a tree and then turn the water over and let the water free in the air, the water will move downward through the air to return to its natural place. If you go in a swimming pool and take a tube or a ball filled with air and push it down under the water and try to hold the air under the water, the air in that ball will try to return to its natural place, and so on. If you start a fire and heat in water, the hot air in the water will try to rise. Okay, so the four elements, fire, air, water, and earth, have a nature to them that's created in them, and it creates a certain relationship between the four elements, and they always seek to return to their natural order. The four elements. He goes on to say, these are mutually bound together. These are bound together. The lighter, the air and the fire, for example, are restrained by the heavier, so they cannot fly off. While on the contrary, from the lighter tending upwards, the heavier are so suspended that they cannot fall down. Thus, by an equal tendency in an opposite direction, each of them remains in its appropriate or natural place, bound together by the never-ceasing revolution of the world, which always turning on itself, the earth falls to the lowest part and is in the middle of the whole, while it remains suspended in the center, and as it were balancing this center in which it is suspended, so that it alone, the earth, remains immovable, while all things revolve around it, being connected with every other part, while they all rest upon it. So the earth sits at the center as the lowest, and all of the other elements move with relation to their different nature, in relation to the earth or the solid earth, and that creates a balance in nature. That's what allows the earth to hang in the air, as it were. If we look at a picture of the globe and we see that it looks like it's just hanging in space, Pliny explains that this is because of the relationship between the earth, the water, the air, and the fire balancing each other. The heavier objects restraining the higher objects, and the higher objects balancing the heavier or lower objects. And so that this relationship between the four elements creates the stability and order of the natural or physical world. Between this body and the heavens, there are suspended in this aerial spirit. And the word spirit in classical writing really just refers to air or breath or wind. A spirit is a breath, okay? Between this body and the heavens, there are suspended in this aerial spirit seven stars, separated by determinate spaces, so they're spaced out in a certain order. There's 7 stars in the sky, spaced out by nature, which on account of their motion we call wandering. They appear to wander a little bit. They don't move in a perfect line. They seem to wander, and therefore they're called wanderers. These 7 stars, we call them wandering, although in reality none are less so. The sun is carried along in the midst of these 7 stars, a body of great size and power, the ruler not only of the seasons and of the different climates, but also of the stars themselves and of the heavens. The sun is, in relation to the other stars and planets, the ruler of the heavens. When we consider his operations, the sun's operations, we must regard him, the sun, as the life, or rather as the mind of the universe, the chief regulator and God of nature. He also lends his light to the other stars. He is the most illustrious and excellent, beholding all things and hearing all things, which, I perceive, is ascribed to him exclusively by the prince of poets, Homer. Now, if we were to look at this chapter from a modern scientific point of view, or if we were to look at this from a modern Christian point of view, we might start making all kinds of arguments and criticisms. But as I said in the first video, it's not reasonable to bring modern ideas or modern definitions, Christian ideas, Christian definitions, back into classical literature. That's not reasonable. If we read Pliny in his own context in history, and we let him define his own ideas, we let the ancient writers explain to us what they mean when they use different words. As I showed you already, the word spirit in this writing doesn't mean a spirit like a ghost, like we would refer to the Holy Spirit, or we would refer to an angel as a spirit. That's not what the word spirit means in this reading. The word spirit in Greek, the word is pneuma. Pneuma. That's the word for spirit. And you can use that word to refer to someone's breath. Okay? On a car or on an airplane, we talk about pneumatic systems. Pneumatic. It means they run on air or fluids. Okay? You can't take the Christian idea of a spirit and bring it back and assume that that's what Pliny means when he uses the word spirit. It's not true. It's just not true. Okay? And there are a number of issues in this chapter where if you bring Christian ideas or if you bring modern scientific ideas back into Pliny's writings, it will seem silly or ridiculous. But those are not Pliny's meanings. And I'll explain to you and show you this as we make a couple of notes on this reading. First of all, if you take a modern chemistry class and you talk about the elements in the chemistry class, you'll find that in chemistry there are over 100 quote-unquote elements. All right? So there are over 100 elements in a modern chemistry class, but those elements are not what Pliny's talking about. Do you honestly think that when Pliny looked at the earth, when Pliny referred to the earth, you don't think Pliny knew that there was a difference between gold and silver? They are both considered earth to Pliny. When he says 4 elements and when he talks about earth, earth includes gold, silver, rock, it includes diamonds, it includes the soil in the garden. All of those things are together called earth. So when a modern chemistry class teacher says that there are more than 100 elements in the world, it's not that that scientist is right and Pliny is wrong. Obviously, Pliny knew that there were different substances in the earth. That's obvious. It doesn't take some scientist to figure that out. That's not what Pliny's talking about. He's talking about 4 basic natural elements that make up the whole entire physical universe. The 4 natural elements: fire, air, water, and earth. He understands that there's more. If we break down the earth, there's more than just one thing called earth. Okay, so he's not talking about the elements of modern chemistry. That's a totally different idea. So don't judge the 4 elements as if the ancient people didn't know about different metals or different stones. That's just silly. Obviously, an ancient philosopher understood that the black soil in the garden was not the same as the white sand on the beach. Obviously, everyone understood that. But they referred to them both as earth, as a natural element in relation to the other 3 natural elements. Okay? So let's not be foolish and pretend that this is simpler than it is. So that's the first thing, the 4 elements. Obviously, the ancient philosophers understood that there's more to it than just that. But in the philosophical system that they taught, there are 4 elements that need to be understood to understand the nature of the world and the relation of its different parts in the universe. Okay? The second thing, in this second paragraph, he talks about 7 stars, 7 wandering stars. And what he's talking about there are the planets. He's talking about the planets. Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, etc. He's talking about the planets, okay? The 7 wandering stars. They don't move exactly like all the other stars. They have a different motion, and that's why they're called wandering, okay? And the sun has a certain relationship to them and moves with relation to them throughout the year. He's talking about the planets. Now, again, he refers to 7. as a number. Today, we can say that astronomers say that there are 9 planets. Well, that may make it seem that Pliny and the ancients are wrong and ignorant, and modern scientists are smarter and better. But remember, Pliny is describing nature based on human observation with the senses. With the senses. So if you can construct some crazy telescope that can look out far beyond what any eye can see, and you can find some other body out in the heavens, further off than the furthest visible planet in the sky, and you can give it a name, okay, that's not in Pliny's concern. I'm sure there's much more out there that you could talk about. But Pliny would argue that those things are irrelevant and beyond our observation, and therefore not really important. Okay? So he's not pretending that he can name every single physical object that exists in the universe. He's not. He's talking about that which is accessible to the human senses, and he identified 7 planets, which he refers to here as 7 stars. Okay, but he's talking about 7 planets. And I would also say to be careful. When you hear modern scientists or modern science teachers or television shows talking about how science knows this, science now knows this, you can go back in 10 years and find that the numbers change, the names change. Actually, we found that this is not that, it's actually this. And so science is not this, established, never-changing, certain system of knowledge that many pretend it to be. When I was in school, we were told that there were 9 planets, and we were taught this as if it was unquestionable. We know that there are 9 planets, and so on. I'll read other articles that say there are 8 planets. I'll read another article that says scientists now believe there are 10 planets. So what you can see is modern science is constantly proposing things and changing things based on their observations, and that's fine. That's fine. They're exploring, they're researching, they're investigating. They're trying to learn more about the world. That's fine. But we need to understand that when the ancients say there were 7 planets, it's because Pliny could take you out into the field at night throughout the year and show you the 7 planets. They were unquestionable. Anyone who could see the 7 planets. Okay? So he refers to 7 planets. Could there be more? Maybe, but really, it's not going to have much of an effect on life on Earth. Okay? So he talks about 7 stars, which are the planets, the wandering stars. He then talks about the sun being the ruler of the heavens. And remember, in the first lesson I told you that when ancient people talk about gods and deities, what they're talking about are forces that are greater than natural power, forces that are superhuman. And so when the ancients looked at the sun and they considered all of the things, all of the operations of the sun, all of the things that the sun does, we would have no food if it weren't for the sun. The relationship of the planets and the stars and the seasons of the month, the light of the day and night, it's impossible to even imagine what life would be like or what the world would be like without the sun. The sun really appears to be the master of the heavens, the mind of the universe, as Pliny says. And again, he's not saying that in a Christian worldview. This is not being proposed to Christians to confess as a matter of faith. He's saying this based on observation of the natural world. If you just stand on a farm and pay attention to everything that goes on throughout the year, and you were to ask the question, what is the most important and most influential thing in this world? Everything around you would say it's the sun. The sun controls everything. Again, many modern people don't know these things because they're not engaged with nature. But if you go out into the garden in a flower garden, for example, and watch through the course of the day, the flowers follow the sun as it moves through the sky. If you look at trees in the woods, you'll see that the branches of the trees, all reach out toward the sun. The sun affects the shapes of the trees. It affects the direction that flowers face and grow, and so on. It affects almost every aspect of our life. It affects when we get up in the morning, when we go to bed, when different animals come out. Some animals come out in the early morning when the sun rises. The cows and the horses and sheep will be out in the pasture feeding when the sun rises early in the morning. And when the sun starts to set, all the animals will go back out to pasture to get more food before night comes. Other animals will come out at nighttime and go away when the sun rises. The sun, if we stand in the natural world and just allow our observation to tell us what's true, we'll see that the sun controls everything, speaking in natural terms. The sun appears to be the mind of the whole universe. The sun appears to be the ruler of the heavens. There's nothing false in saying that. That's true based on our observation, natural, simple observation. The sun is the ruler of the physical universe. Now, when he goes on to say that the sun is the God of nature, the God of nature, remember, he's not suggesting to us that the sun meets the Christian definition of the word God. That's not what he means when he says the sun is the God of nature. He means the sun is the supreme influencing force in the natural world. It is the greatest and most powerful and influential, most important power in the physical universe is the sun. And that's true. If that's what the word God means, then it's true to say that the sun is the God of nature. Are we saying, I believe that the sun is God, the creator of heaven? No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying that in terms of physical things, the sun is the most influential and controlling figure in the universe and is therefore the God of nature. That's the idea. And it's true to say that if we define God in the way that Pliny defined God. Okay? Nothing wrong with saying that. We're not saying that we should worship the sun. We're not saying that. That's a Christian idea. We're not making offerings to the sun. We're not saying prayers to the sun. We're not hoping that the sun... It has nothing to do with Christian. It has nothing to do with the salvation of our souls. It has nothing to do with the creation of the world or giving credit to the creator of the world or the savior of mankind. That's not what we're talking about when we refer to the sun as the God of the natural world. Okay? It then says the sun lends his light to the stars, and some people will object and say, oh, ha, Pliny's wrong. The stars are actually suns. They make their own light. He's not talking about those stars. He's talking about the 7 stars, the planets. The sun does lend its light to the 7 planets. Well, when we see the planets, what we see is the light of the sun reflecting off those planets. So what Pliny says here is perfectly true. The 7 stars or planets receive their light from the sun, and so on. And that brings us to the end of this lesson. So, Lesson 3 in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's Natural History course is on Chapter 4 of Book 2 of Pliny's Natural History. We studied the 4 elements, and hopefully you have an idea of what they are, and the planets, or the 7 stars, as Pliny refers to them. I hope that's a helpful introduction. I'd like you to study this lesson now on your own for mastery and complete the assessment to prove that you understand the content in this lesson. And then we'll keep moving on in the study of Pliny's Natural History. God bless your studies.